everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Three Simple Men Making Their Way Through the Galaxy. As always, I'm Tom. With me is Ryan and Mike. And today we continue our journey through the Star Wars universe with Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Fellas, how are we today?
Doing good.
How about you?
Yeah, so from where we left off last time, we went off from Tales of the Jedi, from Episode 4, the Sith Lord, and now we fast forward 10 years later from the events of the Phantom Menace, the Tales of the Jedi, and now we start off with pretty much where Episode 1 was pretty much going forward with, was Naboo and Coruscant. Don't you think?
Yeah. No, you're not wrong there. We're 10 years later, but we're in the same spot. Same place.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a lot has happened, except for just, Anakin getting older and recast. And that's pretty much it, right? Well, and I guess the big thing that Padme is no longer queen,
The Queen.
right? She is now a senator. And yeah.
And
Besides
we're
Also, I think the biggest difference is the security as well. It's not it's Captain Typhoid now that's in charge of.
Well, see, so I'm thinking about that. It probably hasn't changed, right? We could assume maybe he just wasn't on camera, but he was Palpatine's guard when he was senator, right? I would assume he's senator security, and maybe our
Captain
other guy
Panaka, that's who it was. Captain Panaka, that's
is
who it was.
probably still protecting the current queen. We could assume. I mean, 10 years to maybe he retired after, fighting the Battle of Naboo.
not that we have crazy politics as usual at the beginning. Now we're learning about this possible separatist movement headed by the mysterious Count Dooku, as the opening crawl stated.
I say that. Since we're watching chronologically, though, I noticed, Dooku's not mysterious. We now know a lot about Dooku because we met him in the previous Tales of the Jedi episodes. So he's not too mysterious. And there is the line in there at one point when I forget who says something kind of disparaging about Dooku. Maybe it's Padme actually says, "We think it's him." And
Yadi Mundi. Because he says he's
the Jedi suited down, and they're like, he wouldn't assassinate. Well, I'm getting ahead, of course. Yep. So we start off vehicle, how almost all the great Star Wars stuff starts with just a great shot of vehicles coming in or spaceship, and it's Padme landing, and then of course we get a explosion and the death of, I didn't write down her name, but R.I.P.
Corday, yeah.
Corday. Yeah. The death of Padme's decoy, because she loves her decoys.
Can I just say this, going back to talking about ships? We see the Naboo starfighters, the M1 Naboo fighter, and we always see R2-D2, but I think the main ship is a little bit different from Episode 1, because it's more, it's much more wider. Yeah, then, like I said, we see R2-D2 and then they land. Next thing you know, we deal with an assassination attempt. But before that, I kind of thought it was typical humor sense, like anyone can just atone to this or realize that this happens to us, is pretty much when Captain Typhoid says, "There was no danger. I guess I wasn't worried." Next thing you know, the explosion happens. It's like, bro, spoke too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. He speaks too soon. So we get the explosion, but then to jump back ahead, they blame it on Dooku, and the Jedi Counselor members say, "No way, he used to be a Jedi. He wouldn't do that." So it's kind of interesting. We don't really get the story, and correct me if I'm wrong. Do we ever find out why Dooku stops being a Jedi? Like, does he get kicked out? Does he quit? No,
we don't really know what happens, especially this early on. But one of the things that caught my eye too during that briefing was that the Jedi intelligence there said, "Oh, it's disgruntled spice miners," and just like, how bad is your intel compared to what we've been seeing with Tales of the Jedi and some of the other episodes we've been watching. So it's like, wow.
And a part of it is when they're debating about who done it, and it was so hard for, despite how the Jedi felt about Dooku, going back to Tales of the Jedi, they're like, no, like you said, Ryan, he's a Jedi. He can never do that. I
Well,
think
they say he's a former Jedi,
he's a
so
former
they
Jedi,
do acknowledge that he's no longer a Jedi.
but they
And again,
still think he holds value to being a Jedi.
and Tom, you mentioned it in kind of the intro. It's a 10-year gap, right? So
Yes,
who knows? We know that this universe where we're playing around in is always expanding. They're always coming out with new stuff, which is fantastic. As a fan, I love it. I know we all love it. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get a another piece to the puzzle. Maybe we'll get a Tales of the Jedi season 2 that has more info on Dooku and when he,
a
why
young
he
Anakin,
chooses
a young
why he
Anakin
chooses that we. Yeah,
Padawan.
because then we get, and I want to jump ahead. It's a good segue there. We get pretty much our more or less next scene is the elevator, I want to say, where we get Obi-Wan and our new actor playing Anakin. Obi-Wan looking like Space Jesus. He's got the long hair. And they're going up the elevator and they talk about something that happened. Like, oh, when you rescued me from that, and he's like, I rescued you, and it's like this little banter, but it tells us, okay, well, they've been out on adventures. We haven't seen them chronologically.
Yes,
We haven't seen them at all in the actual canon movies and television. I'm sure there's plenty of stories in the non-canonical comics and books, but I just kind of found that interesting that we do still have this gap. And do we need it? No. I like that we're branching off and getting more things. Could it be cool? Yes. Unfortunately, obviously, the actor that well, we haven't met him yet in this, but who eventually plays Dooku is no longer with us. So unfortunately, we couldn't get a specifically him, even if they were to like DH him or something. But I guess they could continue to do like animation as opposed to live action and give us something. But I don't know, just kind of food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that's happened between the 10 years, especially with Obi-Wan and Anakin, because we'll see how like Anakin crafted his lightsaber. And I think the big non-canonical series was Jedi Quest, I think, and that dove into like some of the adventures that Obi-Wan and Anakin had. But to your point, Ryan, I think they are starting to like get into that a little more because I think they're coming out with like a book series or two about Obi-Wan and Anakin. But it would be interesting to see what they can do if they do like a Tales of the Jedi season 2 or just do a new marketing campaign because I know with Star Wars right now they're focusing on like the High Republic era, which is way before all the movies. So
Very cool though. Very excited for that.
Also,
So
can we
go
do
ahead.
a fun fact?
Yeah.
Like we do quote of the day, hot takes, and I think we should add a little fun fact here. It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi reconstructed his lightsaber or a little bit modified to a different version. He never recovered his first one from episode 1.
Yeah, last we saw it, right? It went falling down. So do you think did he reconstruct his, or did he take Qui-Gon's and change that?
Well, from what I've understood was, for the time being, he held on to Qui-Gon's before he reconstructed his new lightsaber. That's what I read about. That's what I think he did for the time being. But it's not that lightsaber is completely new. It's not the one he tried to recover from his fight with Maul. It's brand new.
Yeah.
Do we ever see Qui-Gon's lightsaber again?
We don't. We
No.
don't.
That's a tale for another day.
But that story comes down later
Yeah.
later down the road. We'll discuss it more towards, I think, the original trilogy, where I'll dive into that. Yeah, going back to the banter, just like, Obi-Wan had the sense, he's just like, Anakin's excited to see Padme. He's a little nervous, he's a little tense. It's just like, dude, chill, Yeah, just relax. He's trying to be, ease the tension.
I would say watching this now in chronological order with the Tales of the Jedi, we've had and refresh my memory, but we've watched the master and Padawan relationship between Dooku and Qui-Gon,
Yeah.
and we've seen it between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Yes.
So those are the only two ones that we've seen. Now here we are seeing Obi-Wan and Anakin. And I noticed, and this could maybe probably be the main talking point of the rest of this episode, to be honest. Obi-Wan is kind of a jerk. Sorry to take a hot take, but he's nothing like, and with the disclaimer that Anakin's a younger Padawan than when we saw Qui-Gon and when we saw Obi-Wan as Padawans, right? They probably were a little older. They were closer to moving forward. But it seemed like, in those other encounters, we had both, I think Dooku said it to Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon said it to Obi-Wan. Or sorry, Dooku said it to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon said it to Obi-Wan. Some version of "you're much wiser than I am." We don't get that from Obi-Wan to Anakin at all in this first half hour. It is just pretty much insults. I mean, he's not, it seems like he's not really teaching as much as he's just saying, you don't listen, you're not as good as you think. He really puts him down. And I'll touch back on it towards the end too, because there's another encounter that is very different from Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship. And it's when we see Palpatine and Anakin finally talking. And all Palpatine has to say to Anakin is compliments.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. And I don't want to blame Obi-Wan, but at the same time, maybe Obi-Wan, isn't really ready to be filling the shoes he's filling.
That's what I was going to say too. I want to counter your hot take with another hot take.
All right, let's go.
Like, I got two hot takes. Well, like I said before the recording, like I got numerous hot takes, but that's going to come down later down the road. But this side hot take is we're seeing an immature Padawan because he started his training older. And then we're seeing an immature Jedi master who's teaching an apprentice because he was forced upon this Padawan. So they're both not accustomed to each other like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, Dooku and Qui-Gon. So the trust and the chemistry there is not there.
Or Qui-Gon and Anakin, you're right. It seemed like Qui-Gon, at least with a younger Anakin, his interactions with him were very, it seemed more like teacher, and I'm gonna say this and it's gonna be but everyone else it was more like teacher and student. I feel like Obi-Wan and Anakin, it's more like older brother and younger brother. It seems like, you're my brother, Anakin. We know that's coming. But it does seem almost like an older brother always trying to jab. Younger brother's always trying to kind of like, he messes around with him too. And, later on they're in the speeder and he's going too fast. And, it just seems more like that type of, a different type of relationship. And I think, Tom, you hit the nail on the head with it's at the end of the day, it's just too immature in different ways, inexperienced. And we do get a great line, jumping ahead a bit, but I think this episode we can kind of jump around because not too many crazy plot points happen. With that, I want to segue back to an earlier moment when they're all in the room in the beginning. Did anyone else catch Yoda kind of raises an eyebrow when Palpatine interrupts to talk about how I think he tries to push that Anakin and Obi-Wan should protect the Queen. The Senator, and he kind of like, and there's like a shot of the CGI'd Yoda kind of looking like over his shoulder back at Palpatine, and he kind of makes like a face. I think we're finally getting a Yoda that's a little suspicious and starting to kind of sense like
a little sus.
Yeah, I think you know what it is because Yoda is more of like, this is a serious situation. And going back to his original thoughts after the defeat of Maul, the death of Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan taking Anakin as an apprentice, he's more of like, I really must protest this because I can't have this young boy Anakin who's too old to be trained as a Jedi, who has attachment to Padme. It's gonna just make things worse. And that's where the eyebrow came, and he's just like, that's where Palpatine is more of like, well, this is what I want. And then that's where we get back to like Dooku and just and Tales of the Jedi, where it just pretty much they're just like they're not going against what their order is. Like, no, we have better Jedi to do it, more experienced, more well trained in the Force, and who aren't gonna compromise the sanctity of the Jedi Order. But instead, they just said, "All right, we'll do what you say."
I think also the 1.2 is just like what before like all the senators came in, Yoda had trouble sensing the future, so he wasn't sure. Like, I mean, that could be part of it too. They lost that ability to foresee the future with the dark side clouding everything. So, maybe that could be one other reason why Yoda was suspicious. But I'll just jump back to an earlier point about Obi-Wan and Anakin. Just to me, I kind of feel like Anakin took on the more rebellious form of Qui-Gon, questioning Obi-Wan's directive, whereas Obi-Wan was more by the book, doing exactly as the council was instructed. So to your point, you don't really see that much of development. You kind of see like the same Obi-Wan being Obi-Wan from episode 1, and then Anakin, taking on more of that Qui-Gon because it was more of like a father-son relationship compared to what Obi-Wan and Anakin had at the time.
I think another good bouncing off point from what you just said, Mike. So now let's say we're back chronologically through the episode. Elevator, they meet Padme, but they have a discussion where there's two discussions. One, we get and this might be my quote, I wrote down a couple, but we get Obi-Wan saying, "We're here to protect you, not investigate," which was very reminiscent of Mace Windu to Count Dooku in the Tales of the Jedi episode, where they show up and it's like, no, the Jedi Council sent us to this planet to investigate, or not to investigate. We're here to bring back the body of this deceased Jedi. We're not here to investigate. But Dooku's like, no, of course they want it. We're going to investigate. Like, we're here. And it kind of, obviously it happens again. You get Anakin who's like, oh no, we're here to investigate. Of course it's implied. And Obi-Wan's like, no, we're just here to make sure she's safe. We're not looking to investigate. So I found that kind of juxtaposition or similarity from Tales of the Jedi kind of fun.
Funny that you bring it up too. Is like, you would think being a Jedi with everything that's going on, it's like you'd kind of want to investigate, because I think back to the old Xbox games, Knights of the Old Republic. When you finally become a Jedi, what is one thing you actually do, like, to gain life side points? You investigate like a murder mystery. And now it's just more of like the Jedi are like, no, we're just here, just in and out, boom, bang, bam, boom, But they don't want to know why. They just want to just do the job and just go home.
So another kind of theme that I picked up on, really, again, cheating with the subtitles and paying a little more attention to some of the dialogue, where as a kid I probably ignored it because it was boring. And now I think about it more and more, it's a reoccurring theme throughout Star Wars, where you get, so I don't want characters that have biases, or even I'm trying to think of the word, maybe even they're not, well, they have like, biases against certain people. So almost racism in a sense. And
Racism.
and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, just to point out where it's first seen in order, and we get it at the original Cantina scene. Droids aren't allowed in. We don't serve your type here, is said in episode 1, which we haven't gotten to yet. But we then learn through them coming up with things that, well, yeah, there was a massive war fought against droids. And and droid armies. So of course some people would, would not like droids. And then we see it again with some other characters in future renditions of Star Wars that either don't like droids or have other, things they don't like. Obviously, the Jedi and the Mandalorian, we'll learn, don't necessarily like each other or enemies. But something interesting I noticed in the discussion, Obi-Wan Kenobi does not like politicians at all.
No.
He says to Anakin regarding Padme, she is a politician and not to be trusted. His friend, who he worked with a movie ago to save and protect.
Not to mention earlier, like, oh, she was so excited to see us earlier.
See us again. Yeah,
just have
and
a
then
complete
he's
180,
like,
just like, God.
I'm being nice, and then I'm talking trash behind your back.
And then he does, and he does it, and he throws it out all at Palpatine too, which is obviously not without merit. But he again, he says he's a politician too, like these politicians, and like I don't know.
They only serve
where
those
the
that
hatred
benefit their campaigns. Yeah, it's like
it came out of nowhere, right? I mean, did we really? We really don't see why Obi-Wan just disdains politicians so much. But I found that to be quite comical, but also again a reoccurring theme that we get throughout Star Wars, definitely of certain people not liking other people based on broad generalizations. All right, should we move on to the action?
Yeah, I mean, since we're talking about the conversation between Anakin and Obi-Wan not trusting politicians, that whole scene when he's talking how he's tired, we get a glimpse of what appears to be, before that, I believe, is 2 bounty hunters. We see
This is where the fun begins.
Very nice, well played. So we see 2 bounty hunters. We see one in clear who's the one that's going to be the assassin for the next attempt. We see another character that's very shiny. He's got a jetpack, very reminiscent of someone. We don't know who is he yet, but we'll get onto that later on.
Mechanically or chronologically, it is our first glimpse at Mandalorian armor.
chronologically speaking, yeah.
Yep. So that is our first look chronologically at Mandalorian armor, which was quite fun.
But going back to their conversation, well, first, this is like the first time we see bounty hunters in action, but we also see the Mandalorian, the guy in the armor with the jetpack, saying, "My patient is growing impatient," or "My client's growing impatient." And so now it's just more of like, who's the client, who's doing all these things? Because, like they said, there's series. There's the Spice Miners of Naboo. There's Count Dooku. We don't know, but we know it's still going to go on.
And with that, we get a new type of droid that comes into play. I guess we'll call it a droid. I think it's a droid.
Assassin droid, yeah.
The weird little hover assassin droid
that
can cut glass and release death centipedes.
Cahoons, as
What are they called?
Cahoons. I looked that up right before.
All right. Cahoons. I like it.
Well, we do also, with the assassin who's putting that into it, I believe her name is Zam Wessel.
Yep.
Her name was introduced during that conversation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that she is a changeling after the attack. So obviously we get one, R2-D2 being a cool security droid. We get Anakin doing some pretty cool lightsaber action, right? Cuts up the 2 worms without, cutting a blanket or a sheet or chopping off, Padme's legs. And then Obi-Wan just throws himself out of a glass window and catches a droid.
Can I just say, this is funny? It's like, since you brought that up, it's just pretty much after he pulled out his lightsaber in her bedroom. Sounds bad. I swear to God, it's not the way I was going. But after he kills the bugs, and then people start running For some reason, she just wakes up now.
Yeah, I noticed that too. She was asleep,
Mm-hmm.
not just she was asleep through him jumping on the bed, going, bzz, bzz, and then it's like a cut, and she's then waking up. I'm like, no commotion.
Save me with my lightsaber.
Deep sleep. I will. Oh, before we go on, I want to point out it's not a cameo, but one of her handmaids, because we've talked about her handmaids last Phantom, where Keira Knightley was one.
Rose Byrne.
In this one, yeah, we get Rose Byrne as a handmaid.
Yeah. I watched Neighbors like last week.
Neighbors, I was going to say Get Him to the Greek is probably where I first met Rose Byrne in something and thoroughly enjoyed that movie. But yeah, so it's kind of fun to see that. But yeah, so we get this epic kind of chase scene with this speeder. We get a ridiculous speeder. It's like it looks like a convertible sports car, which rewatching made me think of something in the future that was added to one of the series, and people complained about the vehicles and how they looked. And now looking back, I'm like, you know what? They've been doing this all the time in Star Wars. I'm sorry, but well, not all the time, but at least at this point, we get these fancy speeders. And did anyone else notice that during the speeder chase, we get, I think, 3 species that were pod racers in the last?
We got a dog.
Yeah, I remember Sebulba.
It was a dog. It was a dog. I don't think it was Sebulba though.
No, but just like the species, yeah.
It was a dog, and the dog was in with another species.
Jedi Buju, yeah.
And also
I think another one was the guy who goes, "What the?"
Yeah, I think it was 3, but I think it was 3 species that also happened to be in Phantom as pod racers. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think also going towards when Anakin took his vehicle, I kind of want to give him my hot take right now. It's pretty much like when he picks up Obi-Wan and they start going down. Do Jedi not like seatbelts? Like, what's the deal?
Gravity, man.
What's the deal with no seatbelts? Gotta go a little Seinfeld on that.
There must be some sort of mini tractor beam thing, because later on, when Anakin loses his lightsaber and Obi-Wan catches it, he just like places it on the seat next to him and continues to go. Like it's not gonna like blow out or roll out. Like he just like places it on the seat. I thought that was interesting too. I'm like,
dude, he just raised his hand and tried to catch it, and he used like Smalls from the Sandlot, like, please catch it, please catch it, and just like that, he catches it. No effort.
I mean, obviously, with Obi-Wan not being the kind of pilot that Anakin is too, I mean, he probably did something to help keep it in line too, because during that whole entire chase, Obi-Wan's like, "You're gonna kill me," and like what you're doing is suicide. So it's like different flying styles between the two, and another difference that we see with Obi-Wan and Anakin. So
yeah, and then we get Obi-Wan when they think they lost her. Obi-Wan decides it's an appropriate time to also complain and kind of
berate him. Yeah,
and Anakin jumps out and jumps out of the ship and lands. So, with that,
man, I'm out.
Unless we have any other speed chase discussion, I think we go to the bar, right? Or the cantina, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, we get to the lower levels, which is we're getting to the downtown part of Coruscant because we've seen the high rise where the senators and the politicians are. Now we're going down to the lower depths of Coruscant, which
it looked like a Times Square almost, right? Or Vegas. There was advertisements everywhere. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It also reminded me a little bit of Blade Runner.
Yes. Oh, that's
just
true.
just a little bit. For some reason, I was kind of Blade Runner. But with that, we get into the bar, and I think it might be Mike's turn to point out during this search and rescue we learn a changeling who could change her identity. Not rescue, but the search for her. We see plenty of bar patrons. So, Mike.
Yeah, we'll start things off with the first moment with the meme of Obi-Wan saying, "You don't want to sell me death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life." So that was a classic Obi-Wan move, pulling the mind trick on the weak-minded. But as we go through the bar, we see 2 cameos from Star Wars actors outside of their characters. The first one was Aimed Best as Anakin was walking by.
I'm at my best, yeah.
The best.
I mean,
Who is
second.
Jar Jar Binks, for those that don't know?
and by the way,
second.
so much love to the guy. You know, he deserves all the love and respect and credit he deserves. You know,
Jar Jar was such a quotable, great character of our childhood. I know Jar Jar got a lot of hate from fans, but I mean, I love Jar Jar. Like, he's great. It's just a fun character.
Yeah, and before you continue, Mike, this is where my original hot take was actually going to come. You know, these are just side hot takes because I was just going through it. But continue, Mike.
So the second one was right after Obi-Wan slices the arm, and that is a classic disarming move that we see from the likes of
disarming move. Sorry.
The second cameo was Anthony Daniels, and for those of you who don't know, who plays C-3PO. So we finally get to see the man not in the droid suit. And that was the second cameo.
He's fully clothed, ladies and gentlemen.
For a split second. And
we do get that arm chop off scene, which Obi-Wan loves to do. Arms are not safe around that man.
Give me a few drinks and I'll cut off someone's arm.
Then after that, we see Obi-Wan and Anakin interrogating Zam, and just as about she's to reveal who hired her.
Yep, and we learn a little bit more about that dart later on.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Going back to my hot take about that scene. So when Anakin was rushing into the bar and he said, she's a changeling, she went in there, and Obi-Wan was telling him, patience, use the force. He went in there to hide, not to run. And then when they separated, he says, you go search around, just make sure everything's, I'm going to go grab a drink. Hot take is Obi-Wan maybe did want a drink, but I think because he's more in tune with the force and he's more level-headed, he wanted to bring Zam, the assassin, towards him. That's where he knew, you lost your arm.
Yeah. And Zam's pretty dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, why would you go up and try to, he's been chasing me this whole time and now he's standing in a bar with his back turned to me ordering a drink. Like, you don't think, why would that be a natural thing? Like, you don't think that's some sort of a trap and that he's being aware? It's just kind of funny. So with that, we get again another shot of a character in Mandalorian armor who is unnamed, shooting the dart and then jetpacking away, which was cool. So we saw the jetpack in action. But then we pretty much just have one little more or less scene left, and it's just kind of the discussion and decision that it's not safe, right? For
Also, I forgot to mention this. I was going back to the bar scene, one more thing. To me, watching that scene when they went in, it gave me a Buffalo Wild Wings vibe because you saw the gambling, you saw the football, the racetrack, and all that.
All the games, yeah.
All the games. Everyone just betting and betting. It was Buffalo Wild Wings vibes right there, man.
But so we get kind of the quick discussion that, Padme's got to go into hiding. She's not going to listen. And then I believe the council says, maybe Palpatine can make her do it. Anakin, why don't you go talk to him? Which I found interesting that they send Anakin to go, a Padawan to go talk to the Supreme Chancellor.
Not Supreme, I don't think. I think he's just the Chancellor.
Or Chancellor, just the Chancellor. But they move him, they send him off. And again, this is where I had mentioned it before. We get a very different dynamic where Palpatine said, "You're the best Jedi I've ever seen. You're so wise. You're and just is constantly just flattering."
He's more nurturing. He's more nurturing than Obi-Wan criticizing.
Classic, grooming behavior, for lack of a better term. But that's what's happening, right? He's slowly trying to draw him towards the dark side, and flattery's great, right?
Not to mention he's being
join the dark side. We have cookies. It is. It's just.
Is it chocolate chip? It's dark chocolate chip.
Not to
Uh,
mention he's being that replacement of a father figure that Qui-Gon was to him. So yeah, there's definitely that different dynamic between Palpatine and Anakin versus Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. As opposed to two people competing, it's somebody, you know, that you're competing for the affection of almost. It's very interesting. Anything else about this episode that we want to touch on, or again, it's kind of, we haven't really gotten into the meat and potatoes of the movie yet, but you know,
No.
we gotta do our parts.
No, I think we covered pretty much what we saw. As we get forward with the episode 2, we're gonna talk a lot more about a lot of more stuff.
Yeah.
Because things will get much more complex in a way, I think. Because a lot of things do happen, which we all know, but that's for another time.
Yep.
Mike, anything?
So, well, before Mike, you do your thing, we just, for continuity for people, we ended right before Anakin and Padme board a ship to head off to Naboo. So that's where we end this episode. And with that, I'll send it over to Mike to wrap us up.
All right, well, that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for joining Three Simple Men making their way through the galaxy. Hit that like, comment, and subscribe, and come back next week for some more Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones content. May the Force be with you, always.